Welcome back to the shop once again for the final installment of the LOC Patriot review. As you can see here, what I've got in my hands is the rocket that started it all. This wasn't my first model rocket, but it was from my early days in rocketry. It's an Estes Patriot, and I just love this rocket. I've flown it a whole bunch, mostly on B and C motors. I added avionics tunnel just for fun, and I think it's a great looking rocket, and just truly enjoy the Patriot design. I built a 3-inch version Patriot for my level 1 certification, and now I've got the LOC 5.5-inch Patriot. I put some paint and vinyl on it, so let's have a look. It's sitting outside. Well, here she is. As you can see, I couldn't resist doing the exact same paint scheme as the Estes rocket. I used the standard red, white, yellow with black vinyl, and I think it turned out really great. I used Rust-Oleum paint on this rocket this time, using the sandable gray primer, then a white base coat on all surfaces, and then the yellow and the red. Now that I've had a chance to admire this thing, we have a few steps left to do to get it ready for flight, so let's get to work on it. For motor retention in this rocket, I've selected an Aeropack 75mm flanged retainer. In the past, these have been a little bit difficult for me to install because I didn't have a motor that was the same diameter as the motor mount. Fortunately, for this rocket, I actually have a 75mm motor, so this time it'll be a lot easier to center up the flange. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the retainer in position here and center it up just using the motor itself. I have a 9/64 drill bit that we'll use to make the pilot holes, and I'm going to hold the retainer in position here with the screws that it came with. With 4 screws in place, I figured the retainer won't be twisting at all, so I'll just go ahead and drill all of the pilot holes out now. Final size hole is 7/32 of an inch, so I'll drill out all the pilot holes to full size. You know, it's time to thread in the threaded inserts here. I've done them before in the past, and I found that the material is actually kind of soft compared with the bolt that goes into them. So what I like to do to thread them in is I'll thread the bolt into position and use my Allen wrench on the bolt itself, and then I can really crank them down, get them into position. Okay, with all the threaded inserts in place, it's simply a matter of putting the retainer back on and screwing in the bolts. Now you might find that as you enlarge the pilot holes, they might have gone very slightly off center. So what I find is best is don't tighten down any of the bolts until all the bolts are threaded into their threaded inserts. So we'll just get those started. Make sure they're all finding their threaded inserts, and then we'll tighten them all down. Alright, there we go, and with all the screws in place, I'll just go in a star pattern, tightening them all down here, and that'll be it for the motor retainer. Alright, there we are. And just to make sure there are no surprises at the launch site, one more test to make sure the motor fits. There we go. Retainer screws down nicely. Good to go for the business end. Time to drill the shear pins to the nose cone. Just like with the main body tube to the avionics bay, I'll drill a hole, then I'll tap it, and I'll put the shear pin right in. That'll hold the nose cone in place while I drill the rest of the holes. Now that I've drilled and tapped all the shear pin holes, I'm going to remove the shear pins and add some medium CA to the cardboard where I drilled the holes. This will help harden the cardboard and prevent wear over time. Then I'll re-tap the threads because the medium CA will kind of mess up the threads a little bit. I'll re-tap those and then the shear pins will be good to go in the nose cone. Before getting a weight and balance on the rocket here, I need to install all of the recovery gear. So the LOC Patriot does come with this nice, it's getting dusty now, but it's a nice tubular nylon recovery harness here. It also comes with a 50-inch parachute. Now because I'm upgrading the rocket to dual deploy, I just have the feeling that a 50-inch parachute is simply not going to be enough for a rocket of this size and weight. So I'm going to take the 50-inch parachute out, and instead I'm going to be using this Recon 60-inch parachute. So that upgrades on me there. Also I'm going to need a second recovery harness. So I went to One Bad Hawk Recovery. Got this 30-foot tubular nylon as well, 9/16 inch. It has a third loop inside for attaching the parachute. And I am not sponsored by the company, but they do great work, and full disclosure, they also gave me this pin with my order. In addition, we'll need a couple quick links, parachute protectors, and a drogue parachute. So I'm going to get that all installed into the rocket, and we're going to see what kind of weight we're looking at right now. With the recovery gear installed, I have a final weight so far of the LOC Patriot. Now keep in mind I did add some plywood with the extra bulkheads and the avionics sled for the dual deploy. But if you're planning on dual deploy, you can figure on being pretty accurate for the weight that I have here. The booster section, including the motor retainer and the recovery gear, was 4 pounds 11 ounces. And the payload section, including the avionics bay and the main chute, but no nose weight yet, that was 5 pounds and 10 ounces. So the total weight right now that I'm looking at is 10 pounds 5 ounces. In my opinion, that's too heavy for that 50-inch stock parachute. So I'm glad I went with the 60-inch Recon parachute. So last thing to do is get a balance on the rocket, see if we need to add any nose weight. So I wanted to show you one more change real quick before I get the rocket together and actually balance it. After reviewing where the center of pressure is on the rocket, I found that the center pressure is 53 inches behind the nose cone, which is right about here. And I'm not sure if you can see, but this is where the upper rail button used to be. This is where the centering ring is for the motor mount. And I decided that with the center of gravity being much further higher up than where the upper rail button is, I'd much rather have the upper rail button on the target center of gravity. So I moved the rail button from the upper centering ring to 5.5 inches in front of the center of pressure. This way when I'm balancing the rocket at the field with the motor in, I can just use the upper rail button as a guide on where the rocket should balance. And also, with the rail button being low like this, I was concerned that any breeze might cause the rocket to hang up on the rail and sway a little bit. So that was just a little change that I made from the instructions there. Alright, so just here's a real quick shot on how I set up my rockets for balancing them. I just have the rocket on the cradle right now. And for now anyway, I'm just planning on flying it with the 54mm motors. So I've got my 4-grain 54mm case. I've got a K motor that I'm planning on flying the rocket with. And I've got the 54 to 75mm adapter here. So I just put them all in position for where the motor goes. Tape them in place so they don't fall off, and I lifted the rocket, figure out where the balance is. And incredibly, it is right on where the upper rail button is right now. So that is approximately a 1-inch caliber stability margin right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add about 6 ounces worth of weight to the nose, just to give a little bit extra stability caliber there. And the rocket will be ready to fly pending ground tests. And here's just checking the nose weight here. I measured out about 6 ounces worth of lead shot there. The rest will be taken up by the epoxy. And just tape that to the nose cone. Everything's still in position here, and I just did another lift check, and now it balances forward of my forward rail button, so that'll be fantastic for flight. Alright, got the Patriot set up for the ground test. Starting with the drogue, I'm at 2.4 grams. I plugged into the online calculator how much black powder it requires. It was saying about 2.2, and I found that the calculator is always a little bit conservative, so I've upped it just a bit. We're trying 2.4 grams of black powder, and we have 2 shear pins in place. Here we go. Okay, here we are. That was a good deployment, in my opinion. The altimeter is saying the flight went to about 1,700 feet. And clean separation, and it'll do even better in flight when the payload section isn't being kind of supported sideways against gravity. Alright, on to the main. Alright, time to check the main. I've got 1.6 grams and I've got 3 shear pins installed. Here we go. Alright, enough to get the nose cone off, not enough to pull the parachute out though, so we'll add a little bit of black powder. Well, with the rocket ground tested, there's only one thing left to do, and that's fly the thing. I've got a K1103 Propellant X motor in it, and I'm expecting about 500 miles per hour, 4,000 feet maximum altitude on the rocket. I've got my MissileWorks T3 GPS tracker on board. And right now we're on a short hold, but when we're ready to fly, I'll arm the MissileWorks altimeters, we'll head back, and we'll fly the Patriot.
Going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Boy, that was a great flight on the K1103X. As you can see, it took a little bit of effort to get the rocket back out of the cornfield, but in the end it was worth it. I have the rocket back in one piece, and it's time to wrap up this review. But before I do, I'm going to pull off the avionics bay, and we're going to access the RRC3 and have a look at the data from the flight. In addition to a third auxiliary channel and more flexibility in programming, one of the big advantages that the RRC3 has over the RRC2 Plus is data logging from the flight. Now you can download the log information to your computer, or you can hook up the LCD programmer to the altimeter and get the information that way, and that's what I've done here. So we're going to turn on the altimeter and have a look at a few pieces of information that I'd like to know about the flight. Now I was expecting 4,000 feet and about 500 miles per hour on the flight, and the rocket did fly a bit higher than that. So looking at the log here, we can see that the maximum altitude was 5,053 feet. Maximum velocity was 739 feet per second, and that comes out to 503 miles per hour. So it was a pretty nice push on the way up. The rocket only sat on the pad for about 3.5 minutes before launch. Took 16 seconds to get up to apogee. As we can see, it was pretty warm when I flew, 93 degrees when we turned the rocket on, and it was 95 when we launched. Now on the way down, what we're looking for is feet per second, and here we go. Under drogue, the rocket fell at 62 feet per second. So that's a nice comfortable speed coming down. And under main was 16 feet per second. So that's a nice gentle landing under that Recon 60-inch parachute. I'm very glad that I upsized the parachute to that Recon unit. So let's turn this back off, and we'll wrap up the review with my final thoughts. In this video series, we got to have a look at the LOC Precision 5.5-inch Patriot Missile. We got to see what was in the box. I showed you some construction techniques that work well for me. We converted the kit to dual deploy, and we had a great flight on the K1103X motor. So what do I think about this rocket? Overall, I think it's great. There are a couple minor issues that I've already talked about, and I hate to gripe about them one more time, but I'll just make it quick, and then we'll get on with the rest of the video here. The first minor issue I have with the rocket is the recommended location of the rail buttons, specifically the top rail button. In my opinion, it's a little bit too far below the center of gravity, and it could lead to some binding on the rail. So that's why I moved my rail button, the top one, up to a 1 caliber stability location on the body tube. So you may want to consider that if you get this rocket. The other downside to this kit is, like I've said a couple times already, the 50-inch flat sheet parachute. In my opinion, for a 10-pound rocket, it's a little bit too small. In my opinion, the rocket could come down a little too quickly, possibly pop a fin, and we don't want to see that happening. We want to see a nice, soft, gentle landing with this rocket. So that's why I upgraded to a larger parachute. I recommend that you do the same if you purchase this kit. Now enough of the gripes. Let's talk about the positives to this kit. In my opinion, this kit is one of the best values in rocketry if you want to go with a slightly larger kit. It's 5.5 inches in diameter, which in my opinion is kind of the starting of getting to the big boy rockets. However, it's relatively lightweight and made of standard construction materials that anyone should be pretty familiar with. Cardboard tubes, wood fins, wood centering ring, plastic nose cone. These are all materials that are really easy to work with. In addition, the completeness of the kit is really good. The only thing that's missing if you want to fly at standard deploy would be a parachute protector. Other than that, everything's included in the kit, from clips to hold on the motor, all the way through the hardware, the shock cord, a parachute, which I wish was a little bit bigger, but it's all there. The only thing that you would need to add, of course, is some nose weight. And fortunately, if you want to balance the rocket for a 54mm motor, it really doesn't take that much. Only 6 ounces of nose weight is what I put into it, plus a little bit of weight added from doing the dual deploy conversion. Next of all, what I want to talk about is the weight on the rocket. Despite being a 5.5-inch diameter rocket, it's relatively lightweight, only 11 pounds or so without the motor installed. What this means is you'll fly higher on smaller motors, and you don't need as big of a parachute to come down softly. So I think it's great that you can fly somewhat smaller motors in this rocket and still have a great time with it. Next, I really like the fact that LOC included 3 centering rings for the motor mount. To me, it's important to have a centering ring on the front of the fins and on the back of the fins to box them in. This creates a much stronger joint than just having a centering ring on one side of the fins. So thanks LOC for including 3 centering rings on this kit. And like I said, the last positive to this rocket is the traditional construction. Anyone can purchase a LOC kit with a cardboard tube, plastic nose cone, wood fins, and be instantly comfortable putting it together. And as you can see during the video, I had no issues at all putting this rocket together. Overall, I think this rocket, the best way to sum up this rocket is it's a fantastic introduction to the 5.5-inch rocket size. It's not terribly tall, it's not terribly heavy, but when you put it all together, it's an impressive looking rocket. And to me, it's much more impressive than the 4-inch size Patriot, which is a little bit on the small side for a high power rocket. So 5.5 inches, great. In my opinion, the 7.5-inch LOC Patriot, that starts to get pretty serious and pretty big. This one I can take it a little bit easier on the rocket, fly some smaller motors on it. It has excellent performance on the 54mm motors. That K1103X is a beast of a motor, and just love it. 5,000 feet for a rocket like this on that 54-1706 case, that's great. And I have no doubt that you could fly it on a smaller I motor and J motor as well, as long as you have enough thrust to get the 11 pounds off the pad safely. So in the end, the LOC Patriot 5.5, the combination of looks, the size, and the performance means that this is a rocket that you'd be proud to have in your collection, and I know that I am too. Thanks for watching. See you next time.